basically, I grabbed all of the 10 deck bosses, and I thought it'd be a fun exercise to read what these different terms mean, and then try to figure out where we would place the 10 deck archetypes in overdress. And time to charge, app name for Spike Brothers. Welcome to the team, welcome to the stream. We got Aggro. In the game fast or use the pressure to force the opponent into awkward plays. Kills combo before they come online, but weak versus decks that play for slower defensive value, mid-range, or control. Combo decks. Slow deck that prioritizes late game push through over stall/survival. This usually beats the low pressure control decks, but without enough defense to survive aggro. Control. The slow attrition deck that tries to outgrind but optional specific finishers. Outsurvives aggro and mid-range decks, but lacks the pressure to beat combo decks. Mid-range, flexible deck that plays to survive versus aggro, then plays to pressure versus control, which are decks that I enjoy. I love being flexible. And then tempo, where tempo and value are these two down here, a little bit outside the graph, but it kind of helps you see what the alignment, what their core is trying to achieve. Pressure, the idea of playing for mana/board efficiency, mana doesn't apply to us, and forcing the opponent to make low value plays due to pressure, the win con of fast decks. And then value, long-term value, usually represented by card advantage, or who has more cards. The win condition of control decks isn't health necessarily, but their opponent running out of value or cards in their hand. So what I was thinking was that first we could figure out where the decks align in this graphic, and then as a separate exercise, we can order the decks from most tempo to most value. So I thought that'd be fun. Let's see. Now that we know what they do, I'm gonna slide these over here so that way we can see the full chart. So I guess if we go in like nation order, it'd be I believe I believe Keter is next, Stoichea's last, Brentgate's fourth, something like that. So the first deck we got is the Nirvana overdress deck, and I think this one firmly goes over here because it's a very fast deck. The idea, like if the deck didn't have arcs, it would just be like a super fast aggressive deck with no resource gathering available to it, but arcs kind of covers all that in spades. So the idea is that you get arcs available fast, so that in that way you can turn your overdress plays into something that's a little more value centric. But the central idea is just to be really fast out the gate, overdress a lot, then turn those things into Valiente, make them buff, and then have Nirvana make them bigger and beat your opponent down. Eugene is on the opposite side of that spectrum. Eugene really has no win con, so the only thing that it can do is try to outgrind your opponent as best as they can. So Eugene is playing the game where they're trying to grind down your resources while trying to find ways to get cards out of your hand. Unfortunately, they didn't really give Eugene a lot of tools that gain power. They got some here and there, but not a whole lot. But that's the general game plan of Eugene, is to grind down your opponent's resources and then hope that they can win over time. And it doesn't do that fantastically well, but that's the general idea. And we'll see if they get some improvement going into the future. And then our boy Bruce. Now, Bruce is a tale of two situations. When Bruce came out, like you saw Final Rush, you saw Soul Blast 5, you saw Restand in the front row. So everybody, myself included, was like, all right, cool, late game combo deck. And ideas to continually try to get 5 in Soul, use Final Rush and beat your opponent down. However, with the fortune that was set 1, they gave Bruce some tools to operate in the early game via Eden and my new favorite toy, the Gun, which is the grade 1 that says on place Soul Charge 1, and then once per turn Soul Blast 3 to draw a card. And then if you choose to play it, you can also use Electro Spartan with it to try to soul charge 2 and then combine it with Gun. So basically you turn it into on place draw card, because then you don't really feel the burden of the Soul Blast cost. But with the inclusion of those cards in set 1, it really helped Bruce play more in the early game as opposed to being fully focused on late game beatdown. So where Bruce may have been here at first, he kind of edges more into here, into the mid-range category, because Eden offers a lot of pressure and the ability to retire through attacks, which can help chop down on your opponent's resources. So in the moment you have to play a slower game, maybe against Nirvana / overdress, you can try to abuse that and try to grind down the resources, maybe play a little more of a control based game, and then beat them over the top with the heavy swings of your final rush turns. But against the Eugenes of the world, you want to get on the ground quick, beat them down before they can stabilize, and then start to attrition you out. So Bruce really changed the most, in my opinion, of archetype between start deck and set 1, the way it played out. And I'm all for it because mid-range decks are my favorite decks to play. So just so happens that my favorite style of deck ended up being the Bruce deck, which is my favorite deck because of the spikes aesthetic and because it's really fun to play as well. Bruce, center of the universe. Barrow Magnus. Now Barrow Magnus is more of the control deck because your entire deck is like, you have Barrow Magnus, you have triggers, and then you have an assortment of cards that can soul charge because you're trying to get to 10 and 15 as fast as possible. If you get the 10, that's where you get a lot of value from, being able to draw and pressure with crit. But then 15 is when you become a multi-attack deck, and then you can start becoming a more attrition style as well. But it also comes at the consequence of burning your deck down because you're soul charging a whole lot to get there. And then you combine that with drive checks, damage checks, and drawing for turn. You have to try to end the game quickly once you hit that 15 soul stage. So Barrow Magnus kind of fits maybe somewhere in this combo control area, because definitely not here, definitely not here in my opinion, but I can see it more here. You won't find a lot of decks that are like this aggro control line down here, but I put it more up in here. Agree? Disagree? How we feel about that? He's only control at the very end. Like even at the 15, the control aspect is more of a bonus. The board wipe is just cherry on top. The key of it is that you get to absorb everything, but then you still call 2 out and get 2 more attacks, or 1 more attack if you want a really big column. I think that's where the cherry on top comes. I'm sorry. You want to get there for the multi-attack, and then the cherry on top comes from the whole board wipe. Kind of help you feel like it's worth it to make it there. If the 15 skill wasn't what it was, you wouldn't feel like it was worthwhile to make it there. So then you might tailor your deck just to make it to 10, and then the rest of your deck kind of does something different. But if you're trying to make it to 15 because it's worthwhile, then I feel like it puts it more up in here than down here, if that makes sense. Now Bastion, like somewhere like overlapped, it becomes the original dress of our overdress. But yeah, it kind of exists here. Like overdress is certainly faster out the gate on your turn 2, but when Bastion makes it to turn 3, it's like, oh boy, hang on, because that boy coming. That's the way it feels. But it's certainly more of it's like a heavy aggressive deck. Like it doesn't come out the gate fast, but once it hits its stride, it's all downhill speed from there. I don't think it's more aggro than overdress, because Bastion, unless you high roll the Fort's Call, takes it more time to come out the gate, as opposed to the overdress deck, which if it opens up the nuts, then they can have a 15k arcs on one side, the Vanguard in the middle, and then 20k Virina on the other side, against you that might have an 8k or a 10k Vanguard depending on what grade that you're on, which to me is certainly scarier than what Bastion can do once it hits the at that moment in time. Like when Bastion's turn 3, like yeah, it gets very scary, but I don't think it's as quick to be scary as the Virina deck can be. The Hexa Orb deck, it's like, it's like in this weird, it's like not quite mid-range because it doesn't have as many control tools, but it's kind of like in this aggro combo world because you're putting pieces together to make sure that Hexa Orb can work, and then you're doing a lot of, you need pieces to like keep checking the top, because since you can scry so much, you might be able to find your over trigger and readily check it as opposed to drawing it or damage checking it. So you're trying to use these top checks to manipulate your top, and they only work one turn. So you're trying to find them turn over turn, and then you try to combine it with the fact that Hexa Orb, every trigger you find is 20k power. So that's why I kind of feel like it's more of the, not quite as aggro, but like here, like it's a weird dynamic. Let me know if you agree with that particular assessment. I'm down to move it. That's just kind of the way I feel about it after seeing it played a whole lot. Is it aggro? Might put on the opposite side, like over here, like combo control. Maybe here. Maybe there is a deck that kind of fits in this aggro control. Maybe it's up here. Maybe it's like here would be like if it had like a retire option to do, right? But I guess it kind of does if you choose to play the grade 1, the one that bottom decks with a counter blast if you trigger check. But the decks that I've seen don't really use the tier square. It kind of opts to use the retire itself, draw booster, and then the soul blast to countercharge grade 1, and then of course it plays the divine sister that rests herself on place to check the top 2. It's weird. What do people think? Aggro combo? Wouldn't aggro control just be curved tempo? Like, I don't think a deck like this exists. I would just put a deck, like if you put something here, I would just put it here in mid-range, because that's kind of what it does. It plays aggro when it needs to, then it plays control when it needs to. But I think you can find a deck that can exist outside on these two planes. Maybe I'm just being weird about it. Maybe I'm just being weird about it. Maybe mid-rangey above Bruce. I'll put it there for now. Orfist. Orfist kind of exists on this plane of existence, because he really wants to play the value game and abuse the fact that he can generate these 15k tokens, and then it kind of has like small control manipulation here. But to me, Orfist really plays like a really attrition-based gameplay. You generate free value with your tokens, and then you just hold a fistful of cards that you can protect yourself with. Or you might use the orders to filter or to pop something as a 1-for-1 trade. But Orfist kind of fits here. It's not quite full control because it actually has some bulk to it with the shadow tokens. So it kind of fits more here to me. Mid-range, more in this plane of existence. I think it goes here. We can reevaluate once we got the full thing out. Prison kind of exists here. Unfortunately, all the other decks, or all like the things that are perceived right now to be the top stuff, has favorable matchups into Prison, and it can really play around the fact that you need to get 3 in Prison to trigger Snow. I definitely suspect that they're gonna give Snow some more tools in set 2. Maybe you'll see something in the Festival Collection card that they receive, but the deck needs some help, but it is more of a control based style. Like, they do try to play for tempo, but they don't have a lot of oomph at the moment. Like, it hits like 23k, which is good, but I think it plays more of a control-y style. I like how I'm giving a critique about the deck and not really talking about the way that it plays. I apologize for that. But the way it plays to me is more of a control style, because it's trying to manipulate your resources. It could be more of like tempo based there, like down here, but when we get there, but I think it fits there in terms of the general deck and the way it functions at the moment. But isn't Prison better than Eugene? People think so. It's like a toss up between which two are better right now. But I think that's kind of off topic. So I kind of got us down a bad path. I apologize. Zorga is an interesting case. I honestly, like, Stoicheia is kind of lost on me. I've play tested 0 Stoicheia. I've only played into it. So I'm gonna need some help here. Chat, What we got? Combo? Is it like the truest combo? Like up here? Actually, it probably could come over here because it got GDR to give 10k to 3 units. So it kind of be a little more aggressive leaning, but maybe higher up on the combo spectrum. Like to me, the definitive for a mid-range deck, if it has a tool to help it defend early on, and to me that's kind of missing with Zorga at the moment. Like it generates value through all of the orders and like the stuff that it can get free calls from drop, but it doesn't have like as high of a tempo outside of formulating power through GDR and through the superior ride. Like if there was something that allowed it to somehow control the board better, I would lean more mid-range. But I think up here, like maybe on the higher side of combo, because you need to find an order every turn to alchemy magic it. Otherwise, one of your primary reasons for playing Zorga goes out the window. Is it combo, or is it more just strictly on this this aggro line, but not quite as aggro as these two? So I guess move this one back a little bit, move this one like that. I think it goes here. Who agrees with this particular placement for the Magnolia deck? Because it's like it's low to the ground and tries to be death with 1,000 pokes, or death by 1,000 cuts at times. Like it does have some ways to gather power. It's just a little bit harder to come by, especially on your Persona Ride turn. 60% aggro, 40% combo. So more like this. See, to me, to the people saying like it should be like way over here, I don't think it comes out the gate as fast as the overdress deck does. Because like yeah, it can plop a board down, but maybe sometimes you don't have the hand, like maybe the calls aren't that good, or maybe you don't have the cards in hand to help sustain. Like it really catches its stride later on after it like chips you down, and then it tries to chip you down and then tries to just beat you over the head with these pokes, and hopefully you don't find a trigger in the process. Maybe sometimes you don't have arcs though. Maybe you don't, but sometimes the odds of you finding either arcs or the regular Virina are very high because there's 8 of them in the deck. So you're building, and you get the free Trick Star off of riding from grade 1 to grade 2. So at the very least, you're guaranteed, not guaranteed, but you have a fairly decent chance of being able to overdress on turn 2 and having some good power. Either a 20k body that's harder to guard, or something that just drew you 2 cards and might help you develop more, so you can turn that value into tempo. My main reason for it being aggro is that it's fast, because the overdress, either arcs or Virina, can come down on turn 2. Arcs is better and be able to give you some cards, but Virina itself is also a very sufficient aggro tool. Seems like this is a point of contention. And like it's tough. Like I think that overdress is more aggressive than Magnolia is, but maybe it can come out the gate a little bit faster than Bastion can, but not quite as fast as overdress can. Okay, like yeah, I don't think it's really combo either. I think it's more down here in this realm, like somewhere in this triangle of aggressiveness. Basically it kind of exists over here. I don't think it has anything to do with combo and being up here. Donovan, thanks for the follow. Welcome to the team, welcome to the stream. So I think this is kind of where our final assessment goes, at least from my vantage point. Do people agree? Would you shift anything up, down, left, right, or otherwise? Basically, I said all of this to just have you visualize the fact that Bruce is the center of the Vanguard universe. He's the entity that is holding it down. I kid, I joke. This was all a long con to have you see definitively that Bruce holds down the entire Vanguard universe. Yes, Bruce is the sun, and this is the rest of the Cray solar system. You think Sorceress would maybe be shifted to Bruce? What do you mean shifted to Bruce? Don't think Orfist is as control as we have it? Like it's not like pure control. I think like in terms of control, it kind of exists in this same plane as a Barrel Magnus, but it's not nearly as aggro as these decks are. But I think it's certainly faster than these 3 decks here, but it's not as fast as these 6 decks over here, if that makes sense. Well, it could be as fast as Hexa Orb, but the only downside is that if you don't give it 2 counterblasts early, then it's not going to be as fast as Hexa Orb, I think. It's in a weird existence. From my experience playing against it, like, it plays the value game. All right, maybe it might exist more down this line here, because this is the combo line. Maybe it might exist more down here. Maybe it's like here, closer to here, because it plays value very well, and then it plays the beefy body game very well, because you get the free beefy bodies via Orfist, and then you kind of just have a fistful of cards to protect yourself. So maybe it fits more in here than over here. I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to put it here. I talked myself into it. Anything else looks egregiously bad that needs to be shifted or talked about before we move on to the next exercise? I'll save this as its own separate thing. So now the next exercise is going to be taking these same decks and we're going to line them in order from most aggressive to most value. And it might be a little more difficult. So I guess if we go with the thing that's the most value, my money is on Orfist at the moment as most value. And then my money for most aggressive, it's going to be a fight between these two with Magnolia third in line. So it's going to be a Royal Rumble over here with these 3. Actually, no, these 2. Definitely these 2 for most aggro, because overdress has the potential to come out the gate faster, but you just know that when Bastion hits grade 3, he's coming in with most likely 4 swings at your face. And the odds of him opening up with Alden, which is the blue dude who gains plus 5k for every swing, the odds of him finding Alden and come out the gate with massive firepower is very high. And then you get the draw cards in the process to help you not feel as vulnerable and help you find more grade 3s or stuff in the future. I'm willing, something like that. I'm a cheat, put like a half measure there, and then put Magnolia third in line. Value here. Then here's where it gets kind of dicey. We're talking value over tempo. Then I guess Eugene would come next in line after the 2 Brant Gate decks. Brant Gate decks. Oh, true. Zorga does get massive value. Something like that. Prison gets put like behind Eugene. It's missing too much. I think in terms of fighting for value and what they're trying to do, maybe the prison deck is up here. Because I don't think Eugene, I guess you have to call to retire, then maybe you can turn him into something. I don't know. It's tricky down here. There's a little bit of controversy going on there. Let's figure out the other 3. I guess in terms of tempo, next would be Hexa Orb in terms of what is faster. And then Bruce. And then Barrow. May I put these 2 closer together? Then like boom bam. Then Magnolia. Then Hexa Orb. Then Bruce. Then Barrow. Then Eugene, Prison, Zorga, Orfist in terms of most aggro, or sorry, most tempo to most value. Shh. The plan in place. Our main man Bruce is the center of the universe. Master of the universe. But I do think Bruce does a nice job of mixing tempo with value, especially when you get to Final Russian and you have your Marjorie online, your Proto Bulb online. He does a really good job of putting tempo into action and then turn that into value back into your hand. The key is just to make sure you don't deck out in the process. Don't get too drowned into value that you lose out on the game. Or don't be so focused on the early game to where you might not have enough to then combo later and turn it into some value. Bruce is way more tempo than value. I think it sits perfectly fine here in the middle because it doesn't do a whole lot early on. Like, it kind of plays a little bit slower. Like, it has some tools in the early game to help defend itself and maybe put a little bit of pressure on, but it's not trying to burn your face down in the process. But then later game, it has some more tempo, and then it has cards like Marjorie that has tempo and value, has Proto Bowl, which can turn some cards on board into cards back in the hand, or it might help you find your Persona Ride, or it might find some defense for you, which is more value to help you, some defensive value that helps you survive your opponent's next turn, to then maybe you can combo again and try to win the game the following turn. So it has like this, it plays like two games. It plays like the early game, and then it plays the final rush game. And both those games, it's weird, but I think it kind of fits in the middle here. Like, I definitely don't think it's more tempo oriented than these 4 decks over here, but it also, to me, doesn't feel more value oriented than these 5 decks over here, which is why, once again, Bruce is the center of the universe. He is the star. How is Barrow value? So Barrow's 5 skill is just kind of blast 1, draw a card, and then when you get to 10, it goes into plus 10 in the crit. So then you draw a card and you get 10 in the crit, so it kind of forces more cards. I can't talk, jeez. It forces more cards out of your opponent's hand. And then with the 15 skill, you get those 2, and you get the ability to absorb the boards, and then you call out 2. So that's value because you've minus your opponent's board significantly, probably, and then you still spit out 2 more cards for you to use, maybe to still put some pressure on your opponent. So you get the value from minusing your opponent, and then you get the tempo from calling out 2 cards and still continue attacking. And then Hexa's kind of weird because she doesn't play for tempo early, but then she kind of like ramps it up as well. Kind of like how Bruce does it, but in a different way. But I think she has the potential to be more tempo oriented earlier than what Bruce can. And like all these can shift on case by case basis too. For example, the prison deck on turn 2, when you ride to pink and prison one of your opponent's cards, you can call out Grappler, aka Leroy, who becomes a 15k attacker. If you put an 8k behind him, that makes 23k. Or if you put Autonomic Caution behind Leroy, that becomes 25k, which is a perfect number on your opponent being a 10k Vanguard. Or you can make 23k against an 8k Vanguard. So it can play more tempo out the gate that way, and kind of abuse the fact that you have a temporary card in your prison. But I'm guessing long term, it's going to be playing for value and trying to get value off of your triple drive with Snow, which is why I kind of put it here. Like these 2, like Barrow, I guess these 3, like Hexa Orb, Barrow, and Snow are kind of like a weird case of game flow, because sometimes Snow can be here, but sometimes Snow can be here. Sometimes Hexa can be here, especially if if you early check your over trigger and like you see it in your top check, maybe you're gonna lean more aggressively. Or if you see you have a crit on the top, you might lean a little more aggressively. But then sometimes you might play a little more for value, because Hexa Orb's Persona Ride skill doesn't require you to put a crit on top. You have or a crit or front on top. You have the option to do so. So then you can choose not to and play for value by having a triple drive for Counter Blast, Soul Blast on your Persona Ride turn. So might play for more value here over the tempo here. And then Barrow, depending on how quickly you can achieve your 15k, you might go from playing for more value here, but playing for more tempo because you just saw the nuts and you got the 15 soul very quickly. So you're trying to beat your opponent down as fast as possible before the game is over via deck out. So a lot of these are on case by case basis, but generally speaking, I would kind of align them the way I did, kind of have them in this general vicinity. Yeah, definitely, Ace, definitely. So that's kind of where I wanted to go. Hopefully this little exercise was fun. I'll save this separately.
Listen.